Can um could say it's never long enough. No, the breaks are always long enough. But anyway, so I hope y'all had a great fall break. So yeah, I'm kind of taking the wheels tonight. Gonna be talking about I guess you could say a passion of mine. Um and dealing with students with autism spectrum disorder or ASD, or you'll hear more now, autism. So I'm going to just share my screen with you guys and we'll get started. Right. Everyone's good. Everyone can see the screen, this first home screen right here for learners with autism spectrum. Awesome. Okie dokie. So tonight we're going to be learning, getting exposed to learners with autism spectrum disorders. You may hear it as ASD in the world of special education and autism. So first off, quick little check-in, stress check, just something for you guys on a scale of 0 to 10. How are y'all feeling today? Like, how are y'all having this little quick break last week? Now getting back into the everyday grind of things. How are y'all feeling this week? For me personally, I'd go maybe 4 or 5, I would say, for myself. Okay, cool. Excellent. So kind of right in the middle of the road. Very cool. Excellent. Very good. So here's just kind of a quick agenda, kind of what we're going to be going over tonight. Once again, autism spectrum or autism. We're going to be looking at all the different definitions. We're going to look at how do we identify students with autism, some causes, some prevalence with autism spectrum. What are some things that you as teachers can do and how that you can meet the needs of those learners? More specifically, what's known as task analysis. So task analysis is really neat. I use that, oh gosh, every day in my classroom. So just as we go through these slides, just remember, make comments, be engaged, ask questions, because this is your class as well. And we want to make sure y'all are getting the most out of everything that we're covering in this course. So before, if you don't mind, you had the Canvas module was opened up over the weekend, and it gave just kind of like a brief description of what to expect with learners with autism. And so just really quickly, and based in the readings as well, what are some characteristics of individuals with ASD? What are some things that that you've read through? Routines, excellent. Very specific to routines, language, preoccupation, certain tasks, yes. Social, emotional, excellent. Social skills, interactions with peers, making eye contact, awesome. Those are fantastic. Yep, excellent. Wow, they're flying in. That's great. Yeah. So all of y'all that responded, y'all hit it. Y'all great, excellent. Trouble socializing, communication, routine, social skills. Oh, it's fantastic, man. Social cues. Cool, excellent.
I think there's a little ASD in all of us.
Yeah, I could see that.
I really have it sometimes.
For sure. I like, me personally, that I stick to a specific routine, different things. So this is really just a quick, interesting fact. Autism. So was first used in 1911, and it was done by this guy right here, Dr. Eugene Bueller. And he actually introduced it when he was talking and applying it to adults with schizophrenia. So that was the first recorded use of the word autism. So 1911. Well, what is autism? Okay. So autism is very specific, a developmental disability. Okay. And like y'all mentioned earlier, it significantly affects verbal and nonverbal communication, social interactions, and usually it's evident before the age of 3. And it's highlighted here that it adversely affects a child's education performance. Other characteristics, like y'all said, engaging in repetitive activities or very honed in ideas or repetitive actions, movements. Like you said earlier, changes in the routine, having a very strict daily routine. If that is, interrupted, we that can be a major disruption. And also unusual responses to different sensory experiences, which can look like lot of different things. All right, so how do we go around and diagnose students for ASD? So schools usually will test and classifying a student with as having autism. However, it's usually done, the diagnosis which would usually come from an outside source, usually through like a psychiatrist, maybe a psychologist. But what they're using what's called the DSM-5, the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders. This is the 5th edition. So the thing with the DSM-5, and when you get in the classroom, you may have heard about it now, you'll hear, oh, DSM-5. So it is a tool, and the thing about this DSM-5 is there has been some updates, and I actually had to do some digging around earlier. And there is a DSM-5, what's known as a TR, which is text revision, and that was done back in May of this year. And usually they look about every, updates every few or so years. They do some kind of updates, but they haven't come out with the DSM-6. They just stuck with the DSM-5 and that little TR just to throw in some little bitty revisions. So what'll happen is that, the students will come into the classroom in the school, a lot of times with a diagnosis of autism. And then what you'll do is you'll meet as a team, as an IEP team. You as a general ed teacher or special ed teacher being part of that team. You'll sit down, you'll look at all the information that was put in, and you'll come up with a plan. And you're going to go into how to meet those students' needs and their strengths. Okay. So it kind of looks similar to what we've kind of talked back in the past with like specific learning disability and students with intellectual disabilities. So what are you looking for? What are we looking for in diagnosing this specific criteria? All right, well, going back to the information about it, we look at what's called the A, B, C, and Ds of autism. So what are we looking for? So A, we're looking for social communication and social interaction. We're looking at the student. We're looking at if they have any restricted and repetitive behaviors. Also, if symptoms are present in early childhood. And the big thing is that it has to impair everyday functioning. Like it has to be part of every day, and it has to impact that. So to meet the social communication and social interaction, the A, you have to meet all of the following deficits. You have to have social emotional reciprocity. You have to have some kind of nonverbal communication skills. And also, like you guys mentioned earlier, developing and maintaining those relationships. Those social relationships is key. And I still work with those every day with developing those relationships. So restrictive and repetitive behaviors look like a lot of different things. You may have a student with a lot of different special movements, repetitive behaviors, tapping pencils, clicking, a lot of different things, or very specific interests. I've had students in the past with a very specific interest of SpongeBob SquarePants, like everything was SpongeBob SquarePants, down to the pencil or pen he was writing with had to be SpongeBob SquarePants. And if not, the whole day, the whole routine was thrown off. So that kind of, his everyday functioning revolved around SpongeBob SquarePants. So out of these, you have these 4 different ones. Have to meet at least 2 of these, which is stereotyped or repetitive speech. You may have heard of like repeating phrases or words. Echolalia, you hear students like repeating certain words or phrases. You may say something and you hear the student repeating them over and over again. Routines, routine. That's a big thing with students with autism, is that routine, coming in and having a very specific set routine. I have a student now that every morning comes in, same time of day in the morning, has to go walk into our kitchen area, open up the refrigerator and then close it, come back in, place his book bag down, take everything out individually and set it next to him before he sits down. Every morning he has to do that. And if there's a change in routine, we spend time getting back into that and redirecting some of the behaviors. And that goes with that highly restricted, that fixated interest. Like, I'm fixated on this routine, along with the SpongeBob SquarePants. Hyper or hypoactivity, dealing with like the sensory input. Maybe the lights are too bright, or if you have, like in my case, we have a washing machine and dryer in our classroom in a back area. Well, if that washing machine is going, he might have students that's very sensitive to that sound that it's producing. So a lot of times we have to close a door to keep that sound for that. And it's, different things in the environment. It could be the temperature. It could be the way the classroom's set up. It could be another student talking too loud. There's a lot of different little sensory inputs that can affect. All right, so real quick, one of the diagnosis criteria. So what are some things that we're looking at? Just one of them. And we talked about two briefly. And what can y'all throw out as far as, and I think it's probably you've answered a lot of it already. Restricted repetitive behaviors, very good. Yep. Social communication, there's behaviors. Yep. Nonverbal. Excellent. Verbal. Very good. Great. So y'all are answering. Y'all are doing great. Excellent responses. Very good. Nonverbal communication, behavior, social communication. Excellent. So here's another part of criteria for the C, early childhood. So it may not become fully manifest until social demands, and I'll explain that. But you usually see it present in early childhood before the age of 3. A lot of times you may have students that are diagnosed with autism at an early age, and then come into your classroom, usually kindergarten, pre-K. And so you want to start with that early intervention as soon as possible. So earlier the better for early intervention. And all of those ABC, all of those together have to come together, and they have to impair those at everyday functioning. They have to together, those limit and impair everyday functioning. Okay, so another quick response, not take a long time, but is there a different DSM diagnostic criteria for autism spectrum disorder? You talked about social communication. We talked about the repetitive behaviors, and we mentioned another one that was just described, something about, who can fill that in? Hypersensitivity, excellent. Present in that early childhood, excellent. Impair everyday functioning, perfect. Very good. So when we think about autism, you always hear autism spectrum or autism spectrum disorder. We think of it as like kids on the spectrum look very different, okay, from having strengths in one area and weaknesses in another area. So we have a wide gamut here of autism, a wide spectrum. The first type, and the first type is dealing with what's called as Kanner type. And you may have heard of this before. You may have heard of another one we're about to go over. They're not really associated much anymore. A lot of times it really boils down to the nature of the student asking, oh, I have Asperger's or something like that. you ask the student what do they prefer. You know, if it's I have autism or if I have Asperger's, you know, it's come around to that. But the Cantor type is one end of the spectrum. So with this one, we have students that have those significant verbal and nonverbal delays in language. We talked about the echolalia earlier, about those repetitive sounds and repeating those noises and phrases. You have those persistent fixations on objects with the SpongeBob SquarePants pencils, everything. You have other motor mannerisms like hand twirling or swinging or rocking back and forth. From some examples with some of the students that I work with, the rocking is a big thing. When I have a student, when he's happy, he'll start rocking back and forth, and he'll start laughing. So those are a lot of different motor mannerisms. Sensory integration difficulties, you know, that goes in with the colors, the sounds, the smells, the taste, the textures, um, you know, all those sensory issues. Severe social skill deficits. Some of y'all mentioned about the little to no eye contact and the lack of interest in the peer interactions or make believe play. You'll see a lot of times students, you know, kind of wanting to sit alone and be alone, and there's no eye contact. They don't respond when you call their name. A lot of different little things. Symptoms present before age of 3, a lot of times, and their intellectual capacity can range from a moderate to severe range in like the cognitive abilities. Like we talked about intellectual disabilities recently, and then later in the class we'll be getting in more like the severe and profound, those low incidence disabilities, and they're very routine bound and rule. They stick to the rules, very routine oriented. So on the other side, on the other spectrum, we have the Asperger's type. The best way I can think of that is if you've ever seen, what is the name of it? Big Bang Theory is a prime example. There's a lot of videos. If you just go online and search for autism and Asperger type, you'll see Big Bang Theory. So you have individuals, you have students with an average to above average intellectual capacity. They have a very high language capacity there. The use of certain specific languages are just kind of like, whoa, you know, higher order thinking. But there is that deficit in that social communication. We still see those restrictive, repetitive interests, sensory integration. Maybe we have students on the higher functioning autism who the sounds just is too much. So, you know, perhaps maybe headphones or little earbuds, you know, to stay focused because of the sensory issues. Social skills deficits, empathy and perspective taking is a big one. Desire to seek out socialization, there's deficits. Those friendships, relationships with their peers, with other teachers, with other staff members, family members. You know, we still see the restrictive interests, very focused in on very specific topics and ideas and objects and things. And isolation is another big one. And again, we also see that students on the higher functioning also have those routine or stick to routine, have those very honed in rule and routine factors. All right, so the prevalence. So we're looking at now, based on the CDC, which is the Center for Disease Control. Right now, currently, the prevalence is listed at about 1 in every 54 individuals are identified with ASD. It's changing over the years. I've seen it go from 1 in 88 and here to 1 in 59 and 1 in 54. I've even seen some reports that say 1 in 33. So they're kind of all over the place. It just depends on where you search. But the Center for Disease Control right now is listed as 1 in 54. So I was going to ask you a question. why do you think the prevalence in autism has seen an increase over the years? And there's a little chart here, estimated autism prevalence in 2020. You can kind of see it starts in '04, it's 1 in 166, up to like 2015, 1 in 66, 1 in 59. In the chat, why do you think prevalence has increased over the years? The testing, yeah, wider range of testing, better identification using technology. Very good. Yeah, building that awareness, being more proactive in the technology. Excellent. Yeah, I agree.
I have a question. Do you guys think that every student that is identified with as autism truly has autism?
Good question.
I see a lot of no's.
I see a lot of no's. Very good. There's
Oh
a lot
gosh,
of
and they're flying off the
misdiagnosis.
shelves there, Mr. Hurley. Yeah, it's true. I mean, it's true. Like there has been such an increase in students identified with autism just because maybe we have some quirky behavior, some things that aren't that's exactly right, Ty. Some kids can exhibit those symptoms and outgrow it later. You think about kids now, like how much time they spend on video games and how much lack of social interaction, right? There are a lot of kids that don't go out and parents don't get them involved in activities outside or social interactions and all that. And once they hit school, it's like, oh, wait a minute, they must have autism because they're not making eye contact and they don't socially adapt with everybody. And I agree that it's not every child. Think about your children who are gifted and talented, right? The total opposite end of the spectrum. They're really intelligent, high IQ students. They're quirky. They have some of these behaviors, but that doesn't mean they have ASD. Well, there we go. Ty said she had. Tell us a little more, Ty, about that.
Okay.
It's been a while ago because he's like 15 now, but I remember very vividly, like when he was younger, he loved cars, like he loved them. And then my aunt took him to a monster truck event and he hated the noise. Like if something was too loud, he did not like it. And he also had this weird thing where if anyone played music that he liked, he would like it was kind of like rocking back and forth, but he was like really like just bouncing off like the back of the couch. And it was like something that he would do all the time. And we found it weird. And we would always be like, get him tested, get him tested. But thinking about it now to how he is now at a 15-year-old, he doesn't exhibit any of those symptoms of anyone who is on the ASD spectrum, but back then he did.
He just liked what he liked. I mean, I could say I'm a little on the spectrum. I love Disney. I love Lucy, but I mean, I'm not, and I'm quirky, but it's okay. Yeah. I might have a diagnosis somewhere. I just haven't officially gotten it
yet. Yeah, there you go. So yeah, I mean those are great responses, Ty. Thanks for sharing that. It's interesting to think about that, and a lot of their, being misdiagnosed or going undiagnosed is a real thing, for sure. So here's just a little input here that how the rates vary. It says right here a high in 1 out of every 32 students in New Jersey. And it says because researchers had better access to educational records. However, on the low side of the spectrum, autism's estimated prevalence in Colorado was just 1 in 76. And I think that comes back to with you guys, having more access, more technology, more feedback, more avenues, and having more involvement, even more, being advocate, having advocacy for the community to ensure all the services and care. So, which children are more likely to be identified? So right now, guys, we're, for every girl identified with ASD, 4 boys are identified. So there are boys who are more than 4 times likely to be identified with ASD than girls. And in the first time, found that there was no overall difference in the number of Black children identified with autism compared to white children. However, the number of Hispanic children identified with autism was still lower compared to white or black children. So here's just a chart just for your viewing pleasure of seeing that. So for every girl identified, there were 4 boys identified. So who is more likely to be identified as a learner with ASD? You can just shout it out, unmute yourself and shout it out, type it in, whatever you want to. Yep, perfect. Very good. Boys by 4.
Are you guys seeing a trend with all of these disabilities and who's most likely identified?
Well, I was about to say that, and looking back at her
Ansley,
other
I saw your face, Ansley. You're like,
presentations.
yes, these boys,
Yep.
man, these boys. Why do you think
Yep.
it is? Just out of curiosity, why do you guys think it is? Why do you think more males are identified with disabilities?
I mean, because history-wise, most boys had access to education longer than girls did, so education was very variable.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah, good.
Ty, they are more active.
True.
I
Sometimes
feel like boys exhibit more like outward symptoms than girls do, so that's easier to like flag and then go get tested
Okay.
for.
Okay.
Oh, their brains mature differently.
Interesting take. Okay. More likely to identify as hyper impulsive. Yeah.
You guys go on for further education, that'd be a great dissertation to write.
Yes, it would be.
Mhm.
It's a bit impulsive at a younger age. Okay.
I agree. There's a lot of boys that are a lot more outgoing than necessarily girls. So girls maybe are kind of hide in the background a little bit.
Yeah.
I was just curious what y'all thought because it is
Very
kind of
neat.
a trend.
It is. So what do we know? What do we know about the different causes? So there is significant there's genetics. There's a genetic component. Just some of the data. This is from the CDC. Rates amongst identical twins between 36 and 95%. Rates among fraternal twins is 0 to 31%. I thought this one was interesting. Is parents with one child with ASD have a 2 to 18% chance of having a second student with ASD. Older men, especially those older than 40 or more, have an increased likelihood of fathering a child. Maternal age may also be a factor, but there's nothing really out there that conflicts with one another. This one threw me for a loop. Children born to middle and upper class families are more likely to be diagnosed with ASD, with an autism spectrum disorder, which that's something new to me. I'm going to confess. So that was really interesting to see that statistic provided through the CDC. So potential causes. I know it just kind of jumped ship right there with causes. What is one potential cause? It was a big one. Genetics, biological, the parental age, genetics, very good. Biological, good. All right, very good. All right, so autism and vaccines. This is getting into a little hot topic, for sure, and it's still a debate going on. But you hear a lot of times, you hear a lot of things coming. Oh, vaccines. So we're going to give you just kind of a timeline of all of this and some interesting information background on autism and vaccines. So autism vaccines, we'll start off 1998. And before this slide, you saw a paper that was an article known as the Lancet Autism Vaccine article. And it was written in 1998. Okay, it's not too long ago. The English medical journal Lancet published an article. It was 13 different researchers that claimed that there was a link between ASD autism and the MMR vaccine. And during the study, they had 12 children in the study, and that after the MMR vaccine, symptoms of autism started to appear around 12 to 15 months in 8 of those 12 children, those participants. Okay. 1999, moving along just a year. So 2 studies commissioned, okay, found that there was no link between autism and vaccines. So we keep on pushing along to 2001. They cited the Lancet study saying that thousands of Americans seek financial compensation through the Vaccine Injury Compensation Program, which was in 1988, that it established, to compensate children injured by immunization. So we have parents here saying, hold on, you gave me my cell, vaccines, MMR, they caused autism. So continue on. That was 2001, 22 years ago. The Washington Institute of Medicine came up with a panel of 15 medical experts. And again, they found there's no relationship between autism and vaccines. Okay. There was a really important court case filed by Michael and Teresa Cedillo, who claimed that their daughter's autism was actually caused by this vaccine, and they wanted millions of dollars in compensation from this vaccine injury compensation program. Okay. 2004. I don't know if y'all ever know who Jenny McCarthy is. I don't remember anything that I know. She was big into movies, I think. I want to say that she had something to do with like Jim Carrey. But in 2004, Jenny McCarthy came out and said that her son has autism. Based on all of the research that had come out and saying, wait a minute, no, vaccines. She did believe that vaccination caused her son autism. So during all of this uproar, of all of this information coming out, of those authors that were part of the original study, 10 of those ended up saying, nope, we deny it all, we retract it, citing insufficient data. However, the lead author, Andrew Wakefield, he was not part of that. And what's neat is that you can go on YouTube and you can look up interviews with Andrew Wakefield being interviewed from, I think one of them, a big one, is Anderson Cooper, interviews Andrew Wakefield and asking him about this whole study. And he pretty much he doesn't deny it, but he doesn't support it. He just kind of spins it around and tries to just push his other works that he's written. So 2007, Cedillo's case reaches the United States court. Their suit is just as a test case. And then in 2007, Jenny McCarthy comes out and says, hey, my son has been recovered and has been cured from his autism. So 2009, a lot of it is going on still, and this is a long process. The case rules that the judgment states, I feel deep sympathy and admiration for the Cedillo family. However, I have decided that this case, not on sentiment, but by analyzing the evidence based on that, what these authors have come out, this medical group has come out saying there's no correlation. In analyzing this evidence, is petition has fall short of demonstrating a link. So therefore, they were not awarded the millions of dollars they were seeking. So in 2010, and here's a picture right here of the article. In 2010, Andrew Wakefield was stripped of his medical license, and in 2011, investigation concludes that Wakefield, he misrepresented or altered the medical histories of all 12 patients. So he went in and he changed things around and added the wrong information. And then the most recent 2013 showed that there was no association between autism and vaccines. Here are some other articles that come from the CDC, other areas that have talked about, those vaccines and not associated with the risk of autism. This is just a little see thumbs from the CDC, evidence-based, looking at causes of autism, but they all say there's no association between vaccines and autism. So here's what's happened. Why does this all matter? Wakefield's lasting legacy. It wasn't too long ago. It's less, 20 something years ago. And in a poll in 2011, there was a poll that indicated 52% of Americans think that autism was not caused by vaccines. 18% state that vaccines did cause autism, but there was still 30% that was unsure, that they really did not know. And even after their information came out about this, 47% of the respondents were not even aware that Wakefield, that his research had all been taken back and been recanted. So that's a large number, 47%. And, but that was over 7 years ago. What about now? What do you think? What are your thoughts now? Have you been exposed or heard anything about autism and the causes or anything of that nature? I know I've had, and it's okay, but I've had parents tell me that their son, a son or daughter, autism was caused by getting a vaccination, and they no longer wanted their child to be vaccinated, or diets may have caused autism. Anybody want to share, or if anyone's come across that, or? All right. So why is it important to use the science we know about vaccines and causes of autism? So why would we think the science is important? What do you think? You can just speak out, speak freely, type it in the chat box. The correlation, good. Yeah. Causes behaviors we can learn more about, right? Could be prevented, science claims. And those are all great. There's even I was just spreading around on the news, and there's still studies on autism and the science and the correlation and trying to figure out the genetics and the that they're still trying to get a better understanding. The parent may be coming from. Okay, good.
Yeah, I agree. This is still a hot topic, even
It
today.
is. Ooh.
And autism, when a student is identified, it's like the A word.
Mm-hmm.
It's probably one of the most difficult disabilities for a parent to understand and accept. So I think a lot of times parents are just looking for answers, like why my child,
Mm-hmm.
why is this happening, type thing, because it is a big diagnosis. It is a big label, medically and educationally. So there is huge debate. My ex-brother-in-law and I used to talk about this all the time because he has a son with autism. And it developed shortly after he got his MMR shot years ago. I mean, he's 28, 29 now. And we used to have great conversations around the table about the causes of it. So it's still a topic today.
It is, and me dealing with a lot of the student population in the high school, secondary, so they've already had that diagnosis. But I still have parents coming to me and say, "What can I do to cure it? What can I do? How do I change this? What can I do?" It's still a hot topic, and there's still that sense of, "Oh no, my child is diagnosed with autism," and it's a shock. It's like, whoa, okay. And there are some parents and you'll come across that just don't accept it. They, you'll come across ones that are all for it and trying to find ways and avenues to help their child. And there's some that will come across and be like, I don't want nothing to do with it. I don't want my child to receive those services. And that's a parental right as well to have it if they refuse those services. So those are great responses. So how do individuals get diagnosed? Okay, so what are we looking for in diagnosing students with autism? So the first one is there is no medical test for autism, like blood through genetics or it being neurological. There are some genetic diagnoses that can result in autism, or like a higher likelihood of what you'll hear of was what's known as Fragile X syndrome. So a lot of students, individuals who have Fragile X, which is a genetic disorder, will also have autism. And that there is a connection there, but there's not just a test for autism on its own. So it's diagnosed behaviorally using interviews, observations, specific checklists. And there are other different kinds of assessments and different materials that would be used by like a psychiatrist or a psychologist and within the schools. So the one thing doctors do and schools do is what's known as a developmental screening. And there's different screenings that are done, but the idea is that they're trying to screen for students who may have exceptionalities. They try to get some of those services early, that early intervention, because earlier, you begin that intervention, the more successful those interventions can become. Therefore, the outcomes for those individuals are very promising. So looking at here, this is just a brief thing. So what does South Carolina use? I have some slides here that's what South Carolina uses, different screening tools that are used in diagnosing an individual with autism. So the first one here is the modified checklist for autism in toddlers, revised, the MCAT. And this is a checklist for toddlers that is actually put out by the American Academy of Pediatrics. And it recommends that all children receive this autism screening at 18 and 24 months of age. And so you can look here in this area, some of the things that are looking for, right, are, if you point at something across the room, does your child look at it? And this is given to the parent. It's a checklist that goes through there. It's available in 22 different languages. And there's the website, the chat.org. But you can see some of these options here, these questions. For example, if you point to a toy or an animal in the room, does your child look at that toy or animal? Yes or no? Have you ever wondered if your child might be deaf? Does your child play pretend or make believe? For example, pretend to drink from an empty cup, tea time. Pretend to talk on the phone or feed a doll or a stuffed animal. So, there's this checklist here that's used, this modified checklist. And it is scientifically validated for screening children usually between 16 and 30 months of age, and it assesses the risk of autism for autism spectrum disorder. So in using that checklist, what they will do next, what the next process is that after the nurse or doctor would give this measure to the parent to fill out that checklist, they'll ask these questions, and the parenting of the score, if this is less than 3, there's not going to be any follow-up needed unless, their surveillance or other procedures suggest like there's a risk for ASD. If the total score of that checklist, the range is between 3 and 7, you're going to do a follow-up. Okay, you're going to re-administer that. Maybe there was some other factors that could have affected the student's outcomes. So you'll do another follow-up. If that score, is 2, on that, they're going to refer it to a diagnostic evaluation to look at having early interventions. But if the total score of the MCHAT comes up and it is, 8, greater than 8 or more, then you're going to bypass that follow-up and you're going to go straight to those evaluations and begin that early intervention. Because the key here is getting on board with that early intervention. So here's another couple of tools that are used in South Carolina. Ages and stages questionnaire, 21 different intervals available. This is given through the American Academy of Pediatrics every 9, 18, 36 months. You can see here some different about the social emotional, completing that so the parents to complete and work through. So why do professionals use screeners or use screenings for ASD and early childhood? Why do you think they use those tools? Early intervention, good. Early intervention. So as a school teacher, having a student coming into your classroom, can you automatically say, oh, I think this child has autism? Or, can you make the diagnosis yourself? Who does those diagnoses usually come through? Do you have a standard of that? Okay. A psychiatrist, school psychologist, a doctor, usually, because a lot of times when you have in your classroom, you'll have students coming to you that already have a diagnosis of autism. So very good. Excellent. So some other signs, some other characteristics associated with autism, oversensitivities or undersensitivities, like those differences. What are some examples? What can y'all tell me, or Dr. Simmons, what's something that might be oversensitive? What could be an example of that? Like if someone is oversensitive to something, what would be an example? A concert. Oh, very good. In fact, I had a student went to his very first concert overall fall break, and he had to wear headphones just because the sound was large groups, fireworks, loud noises. Okay, excellent. Ooh, a school assembly is great. Fire alarms. In fact, we had a fire drill today. A fire alarm went off, and one of my students did not know how to handle that alarm because it was my fault. I forgot to prep and let the students know that, hey, we're going to have a fire drill. The lights in the classrooms, very good. What could you do about the lights in the classroom? Dr. Simmons, what are some ideas or some other one? Students, what do you think about the lights in the classroom? Alternative, maybe a lamp, very good. Yep.
Things are, yeah. So they have covers for lights that you can put over in the classroom. I actually honestly have them in my office.
Yeah.
Because the fluorescent, iridescent lights, they actually bother me. They're too bright. So I had a couple of those covers and I put them over the lights in my office. So now my office looks like blue, like you're kind of in the ocean. But
blue.
Yeah, but they have, tan ones or whatever, but those are huge. Yeah, lamps.
They are lamps. I know my classroom, we have light covers as well.
A lot of Christmas
lights. Yes. We have light covers in my room, like different colors, like greens and blues and reds. And then we also have like some lamps placed around the room. But Christmas lights are really, I've seen that used a lot.
The fairy lights, those are huge too.
Yeah, excellent. So very good. So what about undersensitivities? What are your thoughts about undersensitivities? Like for an example, I have students where loud noises doesn't bother them. Like nonverbal cues, they just that's sensitive to those verbal cues. I have students that,
High pain tolerance.
Pain tolerance is a big one.
Bang their heads, and you're like, oh my gosh, that would hurt, and they don't have the same feeling.
Need
Mhm.
pressure at all time. Yep, the pressure. Do you mean like, so Sophia, like the pressure, do you mean like a weighted vest style thing? Like some kind of weights? You just said need pressure.
Like weighted vest, like needing like
Okay.
type thing.
Yeah. Yeah. We have a weighted blanket. It never gets used. Um, it's more of, I think, a choice, but I think it's that oversensitivity in my case, in my scenario, where the blanket is just too much. Um, and so, yeah, twinkle lights, good. Excellent.
No, I have a weighted blanket. I used to go to sleep with that night, man. Sometimes
Ah,
when you have a
I
bad
can't
day,
do
that
it.
stuff just feels good. So I highly recommend it. It really helps.
Yeah. Yeah.
I told you
Um,
I'm a little bit on this spectrum here.
uh, I had a student who was very oversensitive to sounds and changing routine and this, even smells, even touch, oversensitive. So we looked in, I was working with our occupational therapist, and seeing what we could do to see if he wanted like a little confined area space where he could be alone and kind of come and be comforted. And one of the things was the weighted blanket, and it worked for about 2 days. He did it about twice, and then he was done with it. And I think it was the texture. I think the way it felt on him, he did not like. And we tried other ways, and it never worked with him. And so, your two twins, Lizzie, like to weight a blanket on, and that would help him calm them down. Perfect. Yeah, that's
I
great.
love my weighted blanket.
Yeah. I know one of my students like to wear their shoes on the wrong feet for the pressure points. Okay. Yeah, I've never seen that, but I do have students who won't wear shoes. They always had to have the shoes off. It was only socks. And I worked years trying to figure out what we could wear instead of, it was more of a safety issue. And finally it was like, if that's what he prefers, that's what he prefers. And we'll learn and we'll teach him how to do that. Tags on clothes. Madeline, you hit it.
Huge.
Yeah, tags on clothes. It drives me nuts too. But I've had students and other students in other classes where as soon as they come in with a new clothes, the tag has to be taken out immediately. But those are great, excellent. Some others, motor coordination differences. These can look like a lot of times individuals, like you might notice, doesn't have that coordination quite on, like running in the gym. You might see that, being an issue. The coordinating, the different muscles and the movements, it can be a struggle. There's also a lot of sleep issues, and eating problems. There's a lot of digestive issues that can occur. I have a student now, and I'm kind of bringing you out to my world. But I have a student that all he will eat every day is chips and salsa, pears or apples, and Jello, orange flavored Jello, and he'll drink Silk milk. That's it. That's all that he will do. However, on the weekends, mom and dad like to take him, and he loves just chips and cheese dip. And that's what he'll eat on the weekends. He knows that's his weekend kind of like, I guess, reward for his hard work throughout the week. But while he's in the classroom, that's all he will do. That's all he will eat. So eating problems occur, disruptive or non-compliant behaviors. Um, those can look like a lot of different things. Non-compliant. Is it anything from just saying no or just not doing it? It's a lot of different. That comes down to you as a teacher just knowing your student, and working with your student and others in the classroom and other teachers and parents, and hopefully everyone's on board and just looking at those self-injurious behaviors, like what Dr. Simmons was saying earlier about that high pain tolerance of. I've had students banging hands on the table, banging heads against the wall, banging heads on the floor, trying to bang heads on other students, scratching themselves, biting fingernails, pulling hair out, spitting into their hand, and then, trying to fling it on or wipe it on themselves. Some of those other self-injurious behaviors. You also see, other signs: isolation, wanting to be alone, anxiety, high anxiety, and depression are also other characteristics a lot of times associated with autism. So one characteristic, of a learner with autism that we just went over just really briefly because, yeah. Sleep problems, disruptive behaviors, wanting to be alone. Very good. Excellent. So we have clinical and educational diagnosis, okay, conducted by psychologists, neurologists, or a neuropsychologist, within a clinical diagnosis, that child may still qualify for special education services and state that autism disability. Educational diagnosis is usually conducted by school personnel, usually a team, usually the IEP team consisting of people who are familiar with the child. So what can we do? What can you do as a teacher? Okay, these are some things that what can you do in your classroom, because you will have students in your classroom who are on the spectrum with autism. And what can you do? So we're looking at these evidence-based practices.
Hang on one second, Mr. Hurley. So I
Yep.
just want to clarify a little bit more about that educational versus the clinical or medical. So
Mhm.
you all may find yourselves in meetings or eligibilities or things where a student may have a medical diagnosis of autism, but does not qualify for that
5-4.
educational disability. Does anybody remember why? There's two prongs to qualifying for a disability for all disabilities. One is that they meet the criteria, and what was the other thing that we had to look at when we do eligibility decisions? That's the impact in two ways. You can shout it out if you think, take
Shout
it.
it out.
Come on, nobody's brave enough to try.
No one?
Oh,
Oh,
here we go, Suzanne, we got some. It's effective
Yep.
every day in every way. Faith, right. It's all about how does it impact them in the classroom. So you can have a medical diagnosis, and there are children that have a medical diagnosis of autism, but not necessarily qualify as a student with autism in a school setting. So just keep that in mind. They're very different diagnoses. I know I've sat in lots of meetings and had to explain that to parents because it's all about the impact in the classroom. So there are some students with autism that do great. You'd never know. They do, they
Never
do
know.
fine. They very smart. They're doing well. There's no social issues, typically are higher functioning. But there has to be that impact.
Very good.
Awesome job, guys.
Okay. So if you're not familiar with IRIS modules are wonderful. They're excellent resources that go into detail about a lot of different things. And this is one on autism spectrum. And it goes into more detail about the evidence-based practices. And there's different modules that you can view and go through that focus on specific strategies that have been effective in teaching different skills, such as behaviors, and even decreasing inappropriate behaviors for students with ASD. And according to here, the National Professional Development Center identified there are 27 different evidence-based practices for improving student outcomes. So we're going to take a quick look, and I'm not going to give you how are we doing on time? 6:45. So what we're going to do is I'm going to include let's see, Dr. Simmons. I think of the link. Do you see a link? There it is. For the IRIS modules. If we include that on the chat.
Sure.
And what you're going to do is we're going to split you off into breakout rooms, and there's going to be just a total of breakout rooms, and each breakout room is going to have a different topic. Okay. So I'm going to all over the place here. So I'm going to pause my screen, and I'm going to cut and paste all of these in here about what breakout rooms. Have we gotten the breakout? Rooms?
No, I haven't. Sorry, I got stuck
Oh,
here.
you're fine. So what you're going to be doing essentially in these breakout rooms, and we're not going to spend too much time on it, but it's just kind of to get you familiar with the IRIS modules and what evidence-based practices are available. And I'll tell you right now, the big one right now is task analysis in dealing with these evidence-based practices, especially with students with autism. Basically, a task analysis is a step-by-step breakdown in detail of, you know, of a certain task. And that could look anything where it's tying shoes, doing laundry, making a peanut butter and jelly sandwich, um, using a calculator. You're breaking down these steps, and you're trying to break down this complex task into these much more manageable chunks. So there's the link for the module, and what we'll need to do. I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing my screen. And I'm going to cut and paste these in there.
Okay, you're quicker than me because I was doing that, but you're quicker.
So, while we're getting all this stuff set up, does anyone have any questions about anything about the world of autism? It's a hot topic for sure. There's a lot of information in dealing with.
Did you do the breakout rooms, Mr. Hurley, or do you need me to?
If you want to go ahead and start the breakout rooms, we need 6. And I am going to, in the chat, whatever breakout room you go to will be your. So there's the breakout room 2. And then breakout rooms 3 and 4 are going to look at more of middle school and elementary interventions quickly. And then breakout room 5. And then breakout room 6. Okay.
All right, you ready?
And I'm working on the breakout room 1 for those who are like, if I'm in breakout room, what does mine look like? But I'm working
All right.
on it.
Yeah, hopefully you should be good to him. Look, I did it. I'm gonna step away for 1 second. Let me know when you want him to come back.
Yeah, I figured I'll make an announcement. Let's say 6:58.
To be exact.
Yeah. All right. Ink. Got a couple back in. Okay. Well, back to here. So I hope y'all got to kind of browse around and kind of look at around these Iris modules. But from breakout room, the first one, just one person, real quick. What did y'all find about why do educators, or what do educators need to know about these evidence-based practices?
I think educators just need to know about like the positive impact of these practices and also what those entail. Like what are good practices to use in your classroom and what are the
Good.
most effective.
Good. Fantastic.
So yeah.
Very good. Okay. Breakout room 2. One specific early childhood intervention that y'all came across?
We kind of touched on this in class before, but the picture exchange communication system was a big one. And it's good specifically for early childhood because it has pictures. So like if reading is also an issue, you don't have to worry about that being a barrier to communication as well.
Mr. Hurley, I think you froze. Is it just me, y'all, or did he freeze? He froze, right?
He froze.
Okay, so let's go on 3 and 4. Someone give us 3 and 4. Give us a one elementary or one middle school intervention. Let's go with 3 first.
We had said like for individual, we could do one-on-one and face-to-face intervention.
Mm-hmm.
And then for group, we could do video modeling or detailed instruction.
Great. And then another group.
We were looking we saw the different types of modeling, but then we also saw tips of interventions. So like creating a safe place where students can either like go to relax or calm down, but also creating a comfortable environment for them to learn, one that's like less distracting, one that they're comfortable with, like saying you're a friend.
Really good. Okay. And then how about breakout room 5? What's one way to build positive relationships with students and their families?
We talked about how parents are the expert on their child. So one way to do that is just bringing them into the classroom, having meetings with them and talking to them about what maybe works for their child at home and what strategies they use, and possibly trying to use those in the classroom to work with them and like be a team to help the child succeed.
Really nice. And then group 6. Oops, sorry, y'all went too far.
You're good. So I don't know if I did this right, but I looked under behavior and classroom management, and it was building decision skills. And it basically was this like lessons. It was meant for ages like 6 through 12, and it helps them develop values and ethics. And ours is like for like high school and beyond. So I feel like they could use that throughout their whole life, really.
Absolutely. As they transition and out of high school and into jobs. Absolutely. Good job, guys. I think Mr. Hurley.
Sorry about that.
That's okay. We're like, Mr. Hurley, I think you froze.
It froze and my computer just completely shut down and then restarted on its own.
It's all right. We got it. We just carried on.
Excellent.
They did a great job.
All right. So it looks like we're at the tail end. So just a couple of reminders, some like housekeeping things here. Don't forget, if those who are absent, y'all should know this because y'all are here. The questions that are throughout the module and all that. Just make sure you have those submitted to us, to Dr. Simmons or myself, like Thursday at 5. But y'all are all here, so you're good to go. And the ADA scan project that's y'all have been working on, I hope, is due next Monday on the 30th. We've gotten some in so far. They were great. And if y'all have any questions about that project, please ask that. We'll do what we can to help you out. But don't wait till like the night before, the day that it's due, and say, hey, I've had problems. that, reach out to us beforehand and let us know, please. That would be awesome.
And guys,
and
when you're
then-
doing this, I'm sorry, Mr. Hurley.
No,
Make
go for it.
sure, make sure when you're submitting this, please check your grammar, your basic spelling, your sentence structure, things like that. Like, you know, we are not going to be huge sticklers on the APA, but I mean, you are college students, so we do expect complete sentences, proper grammar,
Mhm.
punctuation, things like that. So make sure you read it through. Don't rush to get this done. Okay.
Yeah,
And I
yeah,
can
that's a
take
biggie.
I can take the next two because I added them. So you do have a quiz that's open or should have opened at 7 o'clock or will open at 7 o'clock. That is due by Thursday at 5 o'clock. It's 20 multiple choice, 2 false questions. It will be internet locked down, so you can't use your book or anything this time. We do want to start to prep you for the final because when you do the final, you won't be able to use all that stuff. So we're taking it on your word that you won't use any of that stuff. And then I did update the syllabus today. So November 6th and 11th class, it is going to be a little bit different in the sense that on the 6th we'll meet briefly, but you guys on the rest of the class and then on the 11th will actually go through some IRIS models for behavior and intervention. So we won't actually meet this whole time on those 2 classes. It'll be online. You'll go through the modules, everything except the assessment piece, and then there's a discussion board. Hopefully I did it right for each one. And you have to respond to the discussion board, the question, and then respond to 2 of your classmates. So the directions are in there. It's pretty easy. But it's about tier 1 and 2 interventions with behavior. And the IRIS models are really great. So I think you'll get more out of that than listening to us. Not that Mr. Hurley and I aren't fabulous, but listening to us. So that has been a change. And I did update the syllabus this afternoon and uploaded it. So you'll see that. So we, like I said, the 6th we'll meet briefly. The 11th we won't meet at all. That'll all be done independently. And I will actually stop recording now.